to seeing you all back in October, inshallah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبالسند المتصل منا إلى الإمام الحمام قال حدثنا أبو الوليد حدثنا سلم بن الزرير حدثنا أبو رجاء عن عمران بن حسين رضي الله تعالى عنهما عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال اطلعت في الجنة فرأيت أكثر أهلها الفقراء واطلعت في النار فرأيت أكثر أهلها النساء. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم said, I looked into Jannah and I saw that most of the inhabitants of Jannah were the poor people, fuqara. وَاطَّلَعْتُ فِي النَّارِ and I looked into the fire of Jahannam, فَرَيْتُ أَكْثَرَ أَهْلِهَا النِّسَاء and I saw that the majority were women in Jahannam. Now in this hadith of Bukhari, the first thing is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam is either making a general conclusion from seeing the entirety of Jannah or Jahannam, or as the word ittala'a means, ittala'a is specifically used for when a sun rises. Tulu'a comes from the same word. And there's another hadith, the famous hadith of Jibreel alayhi salam, where it says, ittala'a alayna rajulun shadidu bayad al-thiyabi wa shadidu sawad al-sha'ri, that a man all of a sudden came in front of us. The word tala'a is used over there as well. So what it seems that the area that Nabi alayhi salam saw, and not the all-encompassing of Jannah, or all-encompassing of Jahannam, but what Nabi alayhi salam saw from it, he saw majority fuqara in Jannah and majority fuqara, a majority of women in Jahannam. The women asked, Ya Rasulullah, they said, Ya Rasulullah, why is it that you saw this of us in Jahannam? Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam gives two reasons. One of them is, yakfurna al-ashir. Say that there's ingratitude. There's no thankfulness. That a person can do everything. Our Ustad Mawlana Sulaiman Choksi would say that, mashallah, rings in the finger and, bangles on the side and with the same finger and the bangles clacking. You never gave me anything. Yakfurna al-ashir. And sometimes the husband say this to the wife, you never done anything for me. Not only is this wrong, this is kidb. This is a lie as well. And it's not appropriate. So being grateful is a pillar in having a healthy relationship between a man and his wife, that acknowledging the good you do. And Allah says in Surah Baqarah, وَلَا تَنْسَوُا الْفَضْلَ بَيْنَكُمْ. Don't forget all the little things that you do for one another. We only do the good stuff in the beginning of the marriage. Later on, we don't. That's why they say, if you see a young man open his car door for his wife, either the car is new or the wife is new. Either the car is new or the wife is new. Otherwise, after that, then you pick your own car, you get your own ride, we'll go separately. So having that sense of gratitude. The next two hadith, and then the extension of this topic, inshallah, next week we'll cover it in detail, is what did the Prophet and the Sahaba indulge in? What was their diet like? What was their day-to-day like? Anas radiallahu anhu says, لم يأكل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم على خوان حتى مات وما أكل خبزا مرققا حتى مات. Nabi alayhi salam in his entire life never ate on a table. He sat on the floor and he ate. Tables were available in his time. Nabi alayhi salam chose not to eat like this. In another hadith of Tirmidhi, ما أكل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم متكئا. The Prophet never ate while leaning on anything. And I know we're accustomed to eating chairs and sitting in this manner. But the asl sunnah is to sit and eat. And to not lean against something and eat. This is the asl sunnah. Now does this mean that if you go to a wedding and everyone's on a table, you come and you say, no, we need to have our dastarkhan on this floor? It's because, look, this is the sunnah. One time Mufti Shafi Uthmani, rahimahullah, who was the father of Mufti Taqi Uthmani, he went and, in Pakistan you have a lot more ulama, and they went to a wedding. And in the wedding, people were sitting and eating on the table, and few ulama came and they said, no, put a dastarkhan down. And a dastarkhan was laid for them and they were eating. Mufti Shafi was the grand mufti. He was obviously a very erudite scholar. When he entered and he saw some ulama sitting on the dastarkhan and he saw people sitting on the table, Mufti Shafi rahimahullah told the people around, and I heard this from my ustad, may Allah have mercy on his soul, please recite Surah Ikhlas 3 times from Mufti Alauddin. He told us that Mufti Shafi rahimahullah, when he entered, and people said, Shaykh, sit on the floor over here. He said, no, I'm going to sit on the table. He said, right now, this is looking like tawheen. This is looking like you are belittling the sunnah. That everybody else is sitting on table and then you are sitting on the floor like that. People will look down on the sunnah over here, and the perception of the sunnah will be negative in the minds of people. So he resorted to sitting on the table. So understanding the mahol and the environment when you're implementing sunnah is very, very important. Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam used the miswak of Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Abi Bakr radiallahu anhu, right before he passed away. Now does this mean you go into someone's home and say that, brother, let me use your toothbrush, this is sunnah? No. You have to know muqtada al-hal. You have to understand the situation, the scenario, and where you are and how you are. Finally, Aisha radiallahu anha says, لَقَدْ تُوفِّيَ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم وَمَا فِي رَفِّ مِنْ شَيْءٍ يَأْكُلُهُ ذُو كَبِدٍ إِلَّا شطر شعير في رف لي فأكلت منه حتى طال علي فكلته ففني. Aisha radiallahu anha says that, first of all, in the hadith prior, it says that Nabi alayhi salam never had thin chapati or bread in his life. The bread, if you've seen bread being made, you have the flour, and then the flour has to be sifted, right? And then all the chunks, they were removed, and then you can have a soft bread. Nabi alayhi salam and the Sahaba couldn't afford even a sift. So they would just make the bread. One of the tabi'een, I believe it was Masruq, who came and said, we want to eat what Nabi alayhi salam ate. And if I recall correctly, it was Aisha radiallahu anha says that your stomach can't handle it. And these are tabi'een from the same era, a few years later, and told, you cannot handle it, for we would just grate these things together. Said, how would you get rid of the chunks? They said, we would just blow away, the big chunks would go away, and the small chunks. So that means that the bread they had would have uncooked dough inside, in the bread, and it would just be what they're eating to just fill their stomach. So Aisha radiallahu anha says that in the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam passed away, and there's this beautiful story, and if Allah gives me life, inshallah, one day I'll talk about it. I do this lecture for about 2 hours called The Last 100 Days of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, starting from Hajjatul Wada' all the way till the demise of Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam. So in the last moments, the Prophet ﷺ had gotten rid of everything. Aisha radiallahu anha actually says that that night when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, there was nothing in the house. There wasn't even oil to light the candle. We had to borrow it from the neighbor. So she says when the Prophet ﷺ passed away, we had only one bag of flour inside it. And she said, and there was nothing else. So I would go inside, I would take this flour, and I would cook. I would cook the bread with it. Hatta tala alayya. She said it took a very long time, and this bag is never finishing. She said, so I looked inside it, and when I looked inside it, after that usage and those few times, fafaniya, it finished after that. This is also one of the adab, to not look inside food, especially when food is being served in dishes. I mean, I don't know how to explain this to you all, but I have seen with my own eyes that when there has been dags, there has been pots of food, and there's been far more people, someone doing tawakkul, reading dua and starting and serving, and it being sufficient for the people around them. I have seen this numerous times and multiple times happen. There's a hadith of Jabir radiallahu anhu, that Jabir in the battle of Khandaq, in the battle of the trench, you'll remember that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba had stones around their stomach. And the Sahaba showed their stone, and the Nabi ﷺ showed 2 stones. Why did they have stones? Can someone remind me? They were hungry, so there is no food. So Jabir radiallahu anhu comes and says, Ya Rasulullah, my wife made some food, enough for few people. Please come and have dinner at our home. Nabi ﷺ got on top of the hill, and he says, Ya Ahl al-Khandaq, about 1,000 of them. He says, dinner at Jabir's, lunch at Jabir's. Now you just all, so I see some of the brothers laughing, imagining themselves going to their house and telling their wife that Plano Masjid is coming to the house. That night you will be doing itikaf in Plano Masjid. Now when Jabir hears this, he's walking faster, and Nabi ﷺ is behind. But the Prophet's walk himself was very fast. Today we were studying Shama'il. When Nabi ﷺ walked, the Sahaba had to jog a little to keep up. Jabir goes home and he tells his wife, he says, you know, I invited Nabi ﷺ for food. We had just a little food. Nabi ﷺ invited all of Khandaq. And Nabi alayhi salam told Jabir, he said, Jabir, when you get home, don't uncover the pot. So his wife said, did you tell the Prophet how much food we had? He said, yes, I told the Prophet how much food we had. He said, then what did he say? He said, don't uncover the top. Then he knows what he's doing. So the Prophet ﷺ comes home and he lifts the pot and he reads a dua and he blows inside. My Ustad Qari Rashid Dabelia, when we studied Mishkat, this hadith came in Mishkat, he asked us, does anyone know what the dua is? Anyone here know what the dua is? What the dua was, does anyone know? Li'ila fi Quraysh. Okay. Anyone else? Neither I know nor my teacher knows. Or in any hadith book. We don't know what the dua is. It's not written. But I have heard Li'ila fi Quraysh as people saying that you should recite this when you want barakah in food. I've heard this. Then Nabi alayhi salam called groups of 10 Sahaba together. And he told them to eat. And like this, 100 groups came. They ate food. And at the end, there was more food left than in the beginning. Now, why did he do this? He did this because if you brought more than 10 people in that room, there would be greed. And when there is greed, then it removes barakah. They say when greed enters the heart, then brothers become strangers. And when greed leaves the heart, then strangers become brothers. When greed enters the heart, brothers become strangers. And when greed leaves the heart, strangers become brothers. Finally, one last incident of my own teacher's teacher, Mufti Mahmud Hassan Gangohi, rahimahullah. This incident happened in Toronto, and I heard it as a kid. Years later, I moved to Chicago, and I used to visit a young man. And then he told me that Mufti Mahmud was in his family, and then he himself told me this incident. So one I heard from other people, then one I heard from the man himself who was there in this gathering. He was related to Mufti Mahmud Saab, rahimahullah, and they were in Toronto. This is the 90s. And Mufti Saab, after the lesson, fewer Muslims in those days, but still 50, 60 gathered. Mufti Mahmud Saab was a grand Mufti. He was Faqih al-Ummah. And they said, his relatives were home, and they said, Shaykh, you have dinner at home, and then you call 4 or 5 people for the masjid. Mufti Saab called the whole masjid. 50, 60 people. And my friend told me himself, he said, I remember as a kid, Mufti Saab entered the house, he went to the kitchen, he read something blue on the food. He said, and wallahi, all 60 people ate, and it seemed that there was more food left at the end. That barakah, tawakkul, and to remove greed from the hearts. And to teach your children, come eat together. Nabi alayhi salam didn't feed one sahabi. He could have done that. But he fed people together because there is barakah in eating together. We need to create this culture, especially when our kids are becoming 18, 19, 20, and they're always eating out. Make it a rule. Do whatever you want outside, but dinner, you're home. At least 5 out of 7 days, you're home. Because there is barakah. And a time will come when you'll want to eat with your family, and people in your family won't even be able to eat food. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep our hearts close. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive our elders and our mashayikh. And may Allah allow us to walk into their rightly guided footsteps. Barakallahu lana wa lakum subhanahu wa bihamdihi rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Assalamu alaikum.